be chilling out here in the meantime.
Okay, wonderful. Just want to make sure that everybody saw my message that I sent out earlier. Sent out two. So if you have not finished the pre-test, please make sure that you do that as soon as possible. And then the other thing that I sent out was I want everyone to know that you can go in and take the first quiz again. First one always seems to be the hardest. So some people did really, really good. I almost got a few perfect scores out there. But if anybody wants to retake it, it is up and available. So for week 2, we are looking at MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, and MRI is the modality that I myself, or I was drawn to. There's a few reasons behind that. For me, getting out of working with radiation was a big part of it. I also like the physics component of it. Very heavily physics, where when you change one parameter, it's going to change 3 other things. Maybe 1 for the good and 2 for the bad. So it's just trying to find that a little bit more artistic skill behind achieving the actual image for MRI. So with MRI, this is one of the modalities that once you finish your X-ray, you're able to either cross-train into, or you're able to go back to school to be able to become an MRI tech. So I've got a little video that we'll play first that just kind of goes over how an MRI works, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it a little bit. Maybe.
MRI is a medical imaging device commonly used to examine the soft tissues of the human body. Let's meet the machine. The key components are the magnet, radio waves, gradient, and a computer. Our bodies are made up of 60% water, and water is magnetic. Each of the billions of water molecules inside us consists of an oxygen atom bonded to 2 hydrogen atoms. We know it as H2O. Small parts of the hydrogen atoms act as tiny magnets and are very sensitive to magnetic fields. MRI stands for magnetic resonance imaging, and an MRI scanner is one of the main diagnostic tools that doctors use to examine inside our bodies. The first step in taking an MRI scan is to use a big magnet to produce a unified magnetic field around the patient. The gradient adjusts the magnetic field into smaller sections of different magnetic strengths to isolate specific body parts, for example, the brain. Normally, the water molecules inside us are arranged randomly, but when we lie inside the magnetic field, most of our water molecules move at the same rhythm or frequency as the magnetic field. The ones that don't move along the magnetic field are called low-energy water molecules. To create an image of a body part, for example the brain, the machine focuses on the low-energy water molecules. Radio waves move at the same rhythm or frequency as the magnetic fields in an MRI machine. By sending radio waves that match or resonate with the magnetic field, the low-energy water molecules absorb the energy they need to move alongside the magnetic field. When the machine stops emitting radio waves, the water molecules that had just moved along the magnetic field release the energy they had absorbed, and go back to their position. This movement is detected by the MRI machine, and the signal is sent to a powerful computer, which uses imaging software to translate the information into an image of the body. By taking images of the body in each section of the magnetic field, the machine produces a final three-dimensional image of the organ, which doctors can analyze to make a diagnosis.
Okay, pretty high altitude view of what MRI is. So first we're going to look at how does MRI compare to X-ray. And what you will find across the board with the different MRI image or with the different radiology imaging, everything comes down to the density of objects. It might not be the same density that we're looking at between each of the different objects, between each of the modalities, right? So an object that is more dense in the terms of thickness, hardness, we're able to image with X-ray, right? So X-ray beam goes in, the more dense objects absorb and stop more of the radiation. Whatever radiation makes it through to the imaging plate, that's the X-ray image that we get. With MRI, we're looking at the density of hydrogen in the different body parts. So each different body part, each different organ, fluid, air, bone, everything's going to have a different amount of hydrogen in it, which is ultimately going to allow us to view it and see it compared to the other objects in the body. Now, with X-ray, if you remember, or if you're going through it right now, X-rays are an extremely high energy beam of radiation. So it's right around 60,000 EVs, where with MRI, it is an extremely low amount of energy. It's 0.00000001 EVs. So it's 10 to the negative seventh power EVs. So just an absolutely completely different way of looking at the body. Now, when you're looking at the images, as you can see, with CT, it's still that very black, white, not a huge histogram of data that you're looking at. You know, you're going to have some really white areas, you're going to have some really dark areas, but you're not going to get much of that grayscale in between. Where with MRI, because each body part's going to have a different amount of that hydrogen in it, you're going to be able to get really, in my opinion, the best imaging of the entire body. So on the MR image here, you can see the dark and the gray matter, and you can see the blood vessels, and you can actually see nerve fibers running through different parts of the body. It's an absolutely incredible modality. Now, some advantages, right? Already mentioned, non-ionizing energy source. So you don't have anything to worry about with radiation exposure. Extremely high contrast resolution. The images that we produce are going to be absolutely incredible for the patient's diagnosis moving forward. We can image in multiple imaging planes. And what I mean by that is, so when we want to get a unique view, we have to put the patient in that view or contort them to be able to get, even sometimes getting a lateral knee is quite difficult on a patient that's not able to move around, right? Well, if you want to do a lateral knee of an MRI, they're staying in the exact same position. We're able to change our slices and image in any different oblique or, slice that we want to be able to look at it. Now, that is within reason. We have to make sure that that body part is isocenter, which is right in the center of the magnet. So as we move away from the center of the magnet, we're going to lose in homogeneity and the image will warp a little bit. And then the other thing to keep in mind is, you know, we say that it's ideal for brain and spinal cord imaging, but really it's replaced a lot of imaging across the board for other modalities. So what happens? Well, as the video shared, the nuclei are going to receive and emit radio waves under an influence of a strong magnetic field. While that happens, a coil is going to be capturing that hydrogen signal or the signals from hydrogen that they're putting off. The data is going to be sent to an analog to digital converter, and then the image is going to be reconstructed on the computer and you see it. We talk about hydrogen, right? Hydrogen is the nuclei that we typically use most in MRI. Now, if you end up going into research, it is worth knowing that it's not just hydrogen that we can look at. We can look at carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, potassium, fluoride, sodium, phosphorus. So as long as that element has an odd number of protons and neutrons, we can take a look at it. Now, obviously MRI is our golden standard, right? One electron or one proton, one neutron, single shell nuclei atom that's going to be, you know, more or less it's abundant in every single part of our body. So it makes it very, very useful when we are looking at a human. So a few of the terms that you will hear if you go into MRI is precession. So what is precession? Precession is just where a spinning object is acted on by an outside force. So if you took a top and you spin a top, eventually it's going to fall over, right? The reason that it falls over is because of gravity. If you took that top up to the International Space Station and you spun it, it's just going to keep spinning until it runs into something and maybe stops. But here on Earth, when you spin it, Earth's gravitational pull is going to be pulling that top down. That is precession. So it's a spinning object that's trying to get pushed down to what we call a neutral state. Now, the radio signal is going to have an impact on that precessing nuclei, right? So the top is spinning, it's trying to get pushed down. We're going to be adding these radio waves, and we are going to create a harder or a higher angle of precession on those hydrogen atoms. And they're going to change from a horizontal to a vertical position. What this does is ultimately it is going to shoot out a bit of energy, and that RF receiver, that coil that's around the body part, is going to be picking up that data. Now, resonance is another main part, right? Magnetic resonance imaging. Resonance is just radio waves that are in processing resonant with that nuclei. So it's just the resonance is going to be an equal amount of transferal of energy to match a frequency. So the frequency that we typically use is 64.23, I believe, is what we use on a 1.5 Tesla magnet. it's going to change depending upon the strength of your magnet. Now, the electrical signal. So the RF pulse is going to be turned off. The nuclei are going to undergo something called relaxation. Now, these are happening in milliseconds, right? So RF pulses are turned on and off very, very quickly. Everything is happening extremely quick. That emitted wave from the nuclei is going to be converted into an electric signal. And then once everything relaxes and goes back to a normal state, it's just going to be back in that random configuration until a new signal is acted upon it. Now, there are two different types of relaxations that we're looking at. So T1 relaxation is going to be that longitudinal or spin lattice relaxation. And really what it is it's looking at the time that it takes the MRI signal to decrease 63% from the maximum value. Now, these nuclei are going to process at smaller angles from horizontal to vertical, where the T2 relaxation is kind of the reverse side of it. It's the transverse or spin-spin relaxation. And it's looking at the time for an MR signal to decrease from 37% of its maximum. So this is typically an in phase to an out of phase type of imaging. Now, with MRI, if you've ever looked at a data set of images, you're going to see, sagittal T1, sagittal T2, gradient echo sag, or a gradient echo axial image, a T2 axial. So you'll see that we're imaging in the same plane, but we're doing different types of sequences. And these different types of sequences are going to produce different information for the physicians to look at. So a T1 weighted image is typically an anatomy image. You're going to get very fine detail differentiating between the different structures. A T2 weighted image is going to look at pathology. And then, like I said, you've got different types of gradient echoes, you've got stirs, you've got bold imaging. There's, every single day it seems like they're coming out with a new technique that can show something different. Now, with the magnetic field strength, like I said, Earth has a magnetic field strength. We know that because if you're lost in the woods and you've got a compass, that compass is going to point north. You're hopefully going to be able to find your way home, right? So Earth has a magnetic field strength of 0.5 Gauss. Now, it is worth stating an MRI unit is significantly stronger than Earth's magnetic field. So an MRI unit is typically going to be between 1 to 3 Tesla or 10,000 to 30,000 Gauss. So 1 Tesla equals 10,000 Gauss. So an MRI unit is anywhere between 20,000 to 60,000 times stronger than Earth's magnetic field. These pictures right here, these are some old Philips MR scanners. This is a traditional MR scanner where we also have the opportunity to image with what are called open MRI systems. And that's where you have a top magnet and a bottom magnet, nothing really on the sides. So it helps patients that have claustrophobia. However, as an MRI tech, talking to your patient, being able to get them to relax is a major part of the job. You do have to have some really good, interpersonal skills to be able to be an MRI tech. Bad things about the MRI, the open MRIs are because they are a lower field strength, image quality is not going to be as good, and the imaging is going to take significantly longer. So for that reason, most MR systems are going to be that closed or traditional MR unit. They are going to be superconductive magnets. And what that means is that there's no resistance due to a very low temperature. So what happens is the MRI, to create the magnetic field, you're going to be sending an electrical signal through a bunch of coils around rods that are going to more or less create that magnetic field. The way that we keep a superconductive magnet going is we drop the temperature in that area to a sub-zero temperature. So it's actually negative 456 degrees Celsius, I believe. So or 456 degrees Fahrenheit, negative 268 degrees Celsius. So the cryogens that we use are liquid helium. Keeps it very, very cold because there is no friction. We don't get any transfer of electricity to heat. And that magnet is just going to always stay on as long as you've got it up and running. If you turn a superconductive magnet off, you're looking at right around $50,000 to $70,000 to get it ramped back up. So when an MRI unit is turned off, the superconductive magnet is not. You know, even if you've ever seen an MRI trailer rolling down the road, they've got a huge magnet that's in that trailer. It's going to be shielded. People are going to be okay driving next to it. However, that MRI unit is always on. Even if the computer's not powered on, the magnetic portion of it is. So the coils, like I mentioned before, the coils are going to pick up those signals that are being released by the hydrogen atoms. This is a neurovascular coil on an old Cigna GE system. It is picking up the signals from the patient's brain. Now, I made mention of this before, right? As an MRI tech, you have to help patients get through the scan. That is what makes you an MRI tech. Offering music, relaxation techniques. One of the places I worked at was really into like the different aromatherapies and like lavender scents. Putting the patient in slowly, moving them back out, allowing family members in the room, really talking to the patient, different breathing techniques. All of these things are going to help a patient's anxiety. And for me, just explaining the MRI process and explaining the fight or flight response that might be going on and why they're feeling anxious used to make me pretty good at getting people to finish an MRI without having an issue. Now, contraindications. There are a lot of things that are not safe to go into an MRI unit. Pacemakers, with exceptions. There are some newer pacemakers that are eligible to be put into an MRI conditional state and be scanned on certain MR units under certain parameters. But older ferromagnetic aneurysm and surgical clips are no-no. Metal fragments in the eyes, cochlear implants. Again, there are newer ones that can get scanned. However, the vast majority of the ones out there are not safe. So it does take some due diligence to research and make sure that what the patient has is cleared and what the parameters are for them to be able to scan. Star Edward prosthetic heart valves, internal drug infusion pumps, neurostimulators, bone bone growth stimulators, these are all contraindications and really are going to need to be investigated to find out if they're safe for the patient to have the exam done. This year marked some changes in CMS allowing MRI techs to actually bill the amount of time that they are investigating these things to find out if patients are eligible or not. Now, safety concerns. Obviously, we're worried about the potential hazard of a projectile. However, electronic interference with implants, either making them stop working or, say you had a insulin pump and you went in and it malfunctioned and it delivered the entire vial of insulin, that's going to throw you into insulin shock and you're going to die. So there's a lot of different things that go into it. Torquing of a ferromagnetic object, local heating of tissues and metallic objects, electrical interference with normal function of nerve cells and muscle fibers. Now, the other thing that I have added over the course of the last few years, the different zones are a big thing with MRI now. So zone 1 just means that it's freely open to the public. Zone 2 is typically between one stop gate. So, maybe taking you back into a patient dressing area or a holding area behind one closed door. Zone 3 is going to be the control area and where the technologist is going to be at scanning the patient. And then zone 4 is where the magnet is. So with zone 3 and zone 4, those are typically the most restricted areas in the entire hospital. So at Akron Children's, where I work, we have 7,500 individuals that work at Akron Children's. Only about, let me see, we have 12 up at main campus and we have 4 at our secondary hospital. So what do we got? We got 16 people that have access to zone 4. Little higher number have access to zone 3, but in an organization of 7,500 people, only 16 people can get into this room. Like I said, it is the most restricted room in a hospital. Now, I've got a little video about Kaiser Permanente has some pretty bad publicity going on. This, I believe, is the video of the most recent incident that they had. So we'll take a listen to this.
New at 10, a freak accident at a Bay Area hospital. An MRI scan that went horribly wrong.
And now there are claims that lack of oversight is putting patients at risk. KTV's Brooke Saros investigates how life-saving equipment can become dangerous and life-threatening.
It was late February at Kaiser's Redwood City Medical Center. An ordinary day from the outside, but inside, an MRI technician reported hearing screaming coming from the other room. This photo...
Also want to say we're not technicians. We don't fix the equipment. We're technologists, but...
explains why. The hospital bed was pulled uncontrollably into the MRI machine by its magnetic force. A nurse became pinned between the bed and the machine, reports say. She suffered crushing injuries. The patient fell to the floor. The incident is detailed in a Cal OSHA investigation, concluding Kaiser failed to ensure the door to the MRI room remained closed and employees were following safety guidelines. The injured nurse recalling,
I was getting pushed by the bed. Basically, I was running backwards. If I didn't run, the bed would smash me underneath.
My first thoughts were, not again.
Tobias Gilk is an MRI safety expert whose own research using federal data shows as the number of scans and exams increases, so do accidents, but at 3 times the rate. Gilk estimates thousands of incidents go unreported every year.
Personally, I find it very frustrating.
Online videos show the sheer power of the machine's magnet on anything metal.
It doesn't stop being magnetically attracted. It keeps pulling and pulling and pulling, squeezing to try and get the magnetically attracted object closer to, in contact with, the MRI scanner itself.
It's why there are typically a series of rooms and doors, areas to screen for metal objects. But these findings by the California Department of Public Health show Kaiser Redwood City failed to provide radiologic services in a safe manner.
And it's not just a failure of the last barrier, the last individual. It's a failure of many protections or preventions before we even get to that point.
The systemic problems start, regulators say, with the nurse and patient care tech left unsupervised without MRI personnel. No one, including the patient, was ever screened. The door to the magnetic room was left opened, and the safety alarm never sounded.
In order for us to run an MR center safely, safety education is critical.
Dr. Emmanuel Canal is a renowned radiologist with the University of Pittsburgh. He's studied hundreds of incidents and says safety training is vitally important. And MRI personnel should have minimum standards, just like airline pilots.
And coming from it from an aviation safety point of view, standardization, certification, recertification, ensuring that you're on top of your game. To me, these are critical aspects of what we need in magnetic resonance to ensure that we decrease these incidents as much as possible.
But we found Kaiser's own MRI safety policy was not followed. Records show some required safety training never happened. The facility also failed to test the door alarm annually as recommended. The investigation stating the many safety failures created a culture of unsafe practices. Kaiser Permanente responded to our questions in a statement, saying in part, our teams responded quickly and those involved immediately received the care and support they needed. This was a rare occurrence, but we are not satisfied until we understand why an accident occurs and implement changes to prevent it from occurring again. But a source alleges this wasn't the only incident at the Redwood City Hospital and shared this photo of another accident.
It becomes important for us to ensure that we restrict access to the site only to people that need to be there, and we can control what and who enters and how they're exposed to what.
For the nurse who became stuck against the magnet, she suffered severe lacerations requiring surgery, including the removal of 2 embedded screws. The patient was not hurt, and Kaiser is now facing an $18,000 fine for missteps in a workplace injury accident that could have been much worse. The California Department of Public Health says it cannot speculate on how often incidents like this happen and admits there are no regulations to specifically address MRIs. Safety advocates say that needs to change. I'm Brooks Jarose, KTVU, Fox 2 News.
Hey, class, any questions?
I do. So when something like that happens, I mean, and you say you can't turn the machine off, what do you do?
That is a great question. So you have the possibility to do something which is called a quench. So you can quench the magnet, and ultimately what that does is it boils off all of the helium. And within typically 3 to 5 minutes, the entire magnetic field is gone. Now that is a $50,000 to $70,000 process to get it refilled up with helium. And then it's also about a 2 to 3 week process to get the magnet ramped back up. So not only is it, $50,000 to $70,000, but it's also 3 weeks potentially of lost revenue. MRIs typically bring in the most, I guess I wouldn't say the most, but a significant amount of revenue to a health system. So you can quench a magnet, however, you never want to. And really the most important thing to know is that the magnet is always on. Like I said, that is until a life-threatening event occurs, and at that point you can quench it and turn it off.
That's crazy. So like even if you're like walking in a hallway and you got like some kind of magnet on or whatever, like that you could draw towards this MRI machine?
So not
Like no
within,
barriers?
yeah, so each of the MRI units are going to have um what are called the 5 Gauss lines. So that's within the MRI room. So let me see if I can pull up the video. I used to show this video before. Just need to share YouTube real quick. So with magnets, it is a vicinity. So as you get closer, it becomes more and more dangerous. Oh, what was that video called?
I have another question. So, like in
Yeah.
this instance, you want to make sure your patients don't have any jewelry on, no
Correct.
keys, nothing like that, right?
No
Just
pocket knives, no cell phones. I've had pocket knives that have flown out of people's pockets when I've taken them in.
scary.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, so working in the mobile environment, we didn't necessarily, so like at my facility now, we have 3 devices that a patient goes through before they enter into the room. So we've got the handheld unit like you would see like at a sporting event or, you know, the airport where they'll wand.
Gotcha. Yeah.
We also have a unit that you stand in front of and it will tell you exactly where there may be. I mean, it's so sensitive, it will actually pick up a staple. Like say you had a piece of paper and you had a staple in it.
Right.
That unit will tell you exactly where on the body that metal is. And then going into each of our MRI magnets, we have a camera and a metal detector. So if that metal detector picks anything up, it snaps a picture. And as an administrator, I will review those as well as the other techs will, or the other managers will review them to see if we have patients or employees that are going in and out.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't think of the name of the video.
Listen, paying $14.99 a month for a streaming app and $9.99 a month for a music app.
This isn't the video I was looking for, but hopefully you'll see it. So as you can see here, she's got it in her hand. It's not until she gets right up next to the magnet that it actually comes flying out of her hand. And that looks like a pair of keys.
Oh, he's almost got it. He's almost got it. Don't hurt yourself.
So an object like that is going to be, if you were pinned up against it, it would feel like about 2,000 pounds of pressure on you.
Rob couldn't do this.
So they quenched the magnet. That's why now he can just pull it off, and he's trying to be, showing that he's some strong guy.
So now they have to pay that money to get it back up.
Yeah, so if you are replacing your MRI unit, you're going to quench it to bring it down. They're going to remove everything. So a lot of these different videos that you'll see on YouTube are of them decommissioning the MRI unit before they're installing their new one.
Okay. It's crazy how they just throw like a chair in there. You would think like, that's gonna mess up the machine or something, you know? They just throw a whole
Yep. So you would not do that unless you were getting a brand new one installed.
right.
But that's it, guys.
I have a quick question.
Absolutely.
So I know it's not really related to the lecture, but you said that you went into MRI. Just talking to different techs who have gone into MRI, I had getting like very varied responses as to when is a good time to cross train or look into getting that education for MRI. How long did you wait before getting into MRI yourself?
So I knew that I wanted to be an MRI tech. So going through the X-ray process was just a formality for me.
Okay.
So I finished X-ray. I had a summer off and I went to Kent State University, and Kent offered like a 2+2. So 2 years X-ray, 2 years MRI, or 2 years X-ray, 2 years CT, or 2 years X-ray, 2 years ultrasound. So all the different modalities, they had like a 2+2, and you got your bachelor's degree. So I knew I immediately wanted to continue going through school to get my MRI registry and get a bachelor's degree. Now, I've known techs that have been X-ray techs for 15 years before they go into it. It's really going to depend upon you.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it will depend. I will say the MRI physics is very difficult. And if there's a university aspect where you can go through, a semester of classes, at least focusing on the physics, I would highly suggest that. But like I said, you can cross-train into it. You do not need to have structured university type schooling. But I will say
Okay.
it's a definite, it is absolutely a difficult modality to understand at first, but once you get the physics and you really understand it, it's relatively easy.
Gotcha. Okay, just because I got like very varied responses from some of the other techs who are cross-trained, and some of them say you should be an X-ray for a year before even cross-training. But my intention is to, find an institution just because I struggle a little bit with physics, but I guess I was just curious to know how your path was, but your school offered it, so that
Yep.
makes sense. But thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, as long as we don't have any other questions, I'm going to stop the recording.
Recording stopped.
And the code word for this week is going to be Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Speaking of this week, do you have a recording from last week?
The last week's recording should be on there. Let me.
Because I was here in extern. and I was not aware.
Yep. So you'll just go down here to the recorded lecture under week 1. Click on that. It will open up here. Depending on what type of computer you have, if you get a red X here, just come up to this top gray bar where it says recorded lecture, click on that, and that's going to take you to Zoom, and that will fix whatever issues you have. And then since you weren't in the first lecture, just so you're aware, to be able to get credit for it, you can, watch the recorded lecture, write a summary, and then submit the summary for credit. But because you were on the live lecture and I gave you that code word, you're just going to come down to the week 2 live lecture, hit start assignment, change it to the text box, and then submit assignment, and that's how you'll get credit for being in the live lecture. We've had too many students that turn it on and walk away, and there's no way that I can know that you're really behind there, and I'm not going to ask you to turn your camera on because you don't want to see me.
All right, well, thank you.
Absolutely. You guys are good to go.
All right, you have a good night.
Take care.